What's up, Bulldogs? All right, I have Troy Francis here. We're gonna be talking about ladies dating in the COVID-19 era, and a bunch of other topics. I wanted to bring Troy on because he's one of the red pill gang, and
Indeed.
yeah, I've been enjoying a lot of his videos, and yeah, he's got some good things to say. I think so. So welcome, Troy.
Yeah, many thanks, John. It's really great to be here. I've enjoyed your stuff for a long time, and obviously we worked together on Rule Zero on at least one occasion, which was really good. And obviously we've got some more stuff coming up in the future, including the live event. So yeah, man, it's really good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So maybe just give a little bit of an introduction of kind of what your story is for everyone who's not familiar with you in your channel.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I am a dating stroke game writer and also coach as well. So I do coach guys. I coach guys live. Well, pre-COVID, I used to anyway in London, which is where I'm
Right.
based. And I've also written quite a large number of books about dating, about game, about the dating marketplace. I've got an online course, which is called Charisma and Dating Academy. So, I've got all of this stuff kind of going on online, and I'm obviously active on YouTube, on Twitter, etc., etc. And fundamentally, I've been in this space, well, I mean, as a sort of like, as an untutored dude since my kind of early 20s, really. But I've certainly been in the sort of the dating space since the early 2000s, like around 2005 in London. And professionally, if you like, for about the last 5 or so years, I started writing for a website called Return of Kings, which was run by
Oh, yeah.
Roosh back in the day, which was about dating and self-improvement. Sort of got some traction on there. And then I started my own blog and started writing my own thing. So it's all kind of like spiraled on from there, if you like.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that you've got the old history. So many guys don't know where everything came from. Back in the you know
Yeah.
way back, alt fast seduction forums and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like
Ancient history now, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I was kind of into that. Obviously, there was So Suave, where Rollo
Mhm.
Tomasi came from, which was really good. I mean, I read the game like a lot of guys do. I mean,
Yeah.
before that, I was living in Manchester, actually, in the north of England at that time, and I was going out. I was going to clubs a lot and things, and meeting girls kind of just in the usual sort of way. But it was only in 2005 I read the game and I realized there could be some more structure around this stuff. And then I got involved with a forum in London, which was called the London Seduction Society, where a lot of kind of guys cut their teeth. So, yeah, and I just sort of learned more from there. And then in the end, began creating my own content and so on.
Yeah. One thing I kind of miss from the old days is I mean, like you said, like that there was a lot of structure. It seems like a lot of the game now is so unstructured, and
Yes.
there's definitely some benefits to, like, there's pros and cons, but I remember back in the day, it was like, on those forums and stuff, like if your shit wasn't field tested, if you hadn't actually field tested it, like you like no one believed anything you were saying. Like it was like,
Yeah.
it had to actually be tested in the wild. And today I think that's why a lot of guys are, I don't know, what do you think about that? It's like
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I think it was a good time, really, because that forum that I was on and the other forums that I was aware of, you used to be on there and guys would say, well, what do I do in this particular scenario with a girl? And the other guy would say, well, or you'd say, well, what do you think about this? Will this work? If I say this line or if I do this, is this going to work? And guys would say, well, listen, just go and try it 10 times and then report back. You've got to test this. You've got to test this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain lack of rigor now in some sectors of the dating sphere, if you like. People just sort of say stuff because it sounds good, but you're never sure if they've really tested it or not. I mean, of course, what became popular after that with YouTube was people actually doing in-field demonstrations where they'd actually go and talk to a girl and take her phone number or whatever it was. And I've done some of those. I've got some of those which are behind a paywall now. But then, of course, with YouTube, that kind of thing became a little bit less, kind of viable, perhaps. So, but it's an interesting marketplace for sure. It's an interesting space.
Yeah. So what do you think about now? Like what I mean, man, it's been hard. Like again, I do some live coaching as well. I haven't been obviously not doing any live coaching, but guys
Yeah,
are coming to me now and they're like, what do I do?
yeah,
In this situation. And I actually took one guy out and we tried to go out to like some bars that were open and it was like, wow, there's really not much you can do here because it's like it's all like you know cordoned off, like you've got like partitionings in place, and it's like even just the vibe is just dead, like almost,
yeah,
it's like people are going to bars with their friends that they already know. What's
yeah.
yeah, how are you playing it, or what are you kind of
Well,
recommending right now?
I mean, I think it's partly location dependent, isn't it? Because obviously, depending on where you are, there's obviously different restrictions and stuff around the world. So, like London is starting to sort of open up a bit now,
Yeah.
and they just opened the bars up again a week or so ago, and there was like a really crazy night when everyone went out, and there were loads of people sort of out and about, and there wasn't a lot of social distancing going on. So, you
Okay.
know, and then I'm obviously close to Europe, so some of the cities and countries over there, starting to open up. So you've got less of a problem. If you're obviously in a place where it's really restricted, then in the end you're down to online game, aren't you? You've got to be really working your online platforms because there's only so much you can do if you're still under quite a stringent lockdown, I think.
Yeah. I guess that's it. I mean, yeah, I've really been telling a lot of guys to kind of just focus on building their business and and
Yeah,
learning and doing the things that they can because especially I'm not a huge fan of online game and especially it's really narrowing on one aspect, right? It's like you have to have the looks there. You can't really capitalize on much else.
yeah. Well, I was telling guys from the beginning of the whole period that ultimately, it's a chance to take some time out, to sort of chill a little bit, to work on yourself, to work on your business, and to do all of those kinds of things and just get ready for when we come out of this, because,
Yeah.
it's like you can't work the impossible, can you? And I mean, when, certainly in the UK, when the whole country was closed down, it was very hard. There wasn't any sort of like game trick that you could tell people to be like, oh, just do this. And,
Yeah.
but now it's sort of, depending on where you are, I think it's moving into a bit of a hybrid situation where I think you can now get a bit of traction out and about in some places, but we're still not back to any kind of a normal. I mean, in terms of the online game stuff, I mean, I'm not a massive like online game proponent, but I know John Modern Life Dating certainly is, and I know you were in his one of his webinars last night. I mean, him and Myron are doing some great stuff over there in terms of teaching guys about how to optimize their profiles and all that kind of thing. So I guess that's where a lot of the game is at the moment.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, and I think optimizing the profile definitely. It's interesting because I think it's very counterintuitive, right? Like I was testing some things because I was going to do a video talking about this, and I was using the site Photo Feeler,
Yeah,
which lets you like rate and it was interesting because like I put up some pictures of mine and I had this one picture that I was like, okay, this is going to be the bomb, right? It was me with my shirt off, like ripped
yeah,
abs, like just
yeah,
completely. And man, it got some of the lowest ratings ever. And I was like, I was trying to figure it out, and it's like the like a selfie kind of shirtless pic is like the worst pic you could possibly have, which was
yeah,
counterintuitive because I was like, well, if you're if you're jacked, then it's not really going to matter. But those little things made a huge difference. And then it was like and then I was testing like different things and like smiling versus not smiling, and I was surprised. It's like smiling was a huge boost. You would
yes,
think like that it would make you appear weak or something like that, but instead you would think you'd want a smoldering look instead of a smile. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I just found, like, as I was doing the testing for this video, that so much of the things that I thought were correct were so counterintuitive on
yeah.
there, and then when you actually like test it, you see the results, and it's but but yeah. So I guess there's a lot you could do to optimize. I'm sure most guys are probably just like making all the wrong decisions. Like if I had not tested that and I were on one of those apps, I would have made a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting, the top list thing. I mean, I was just in their webinar just now actually, and they were saying the same thing. They were saying that actually, even for guys who are extremely ripped and well, got great physique, actually these top list shots tend to score they don't score very well. I don't know if it's because girls think maybe they're a little bit intimidated, or they think the guy's arrogant, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, that's an interesting thing. The other thing they're saying is that when you smile, showing teeth it can be important if you've got good teeth, and they always emphasize to make sure that your teeth are as white as possible. Which is another interesting thing actually that I sort of hadn't realized before, that in photos that was so important, but apparently it is.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it just occurred to me too, like this, as I was researching for this video, I was like, man, because I post on my Instagram account like every day, and I was like, I should really like hire a professional photo editor to like go and fix up my photos a little bit, you know what I mean, before I post them. And that like make a huge difference. Again, like things like, you could have your teeth whiten pretty easily, and and small corrections, small blemish removal, change the lighting, stuff like that. So
do you use the same Instagram account when you are, say, in your personal life as you do for your public image, or do you have separate ones?
No, I use the same one.
I
figured that.
Because obviously, well, you've got some great shots, but I know some guys, they kind of have a couple, because they've got one which is sort of like their business public persona one, and then they got another one that they use for dating and so on. But I mean, it's all the same, really.
Yeah. Well, I figure if you've got like, I mean, you kind of have like the social status aspect. If you have a pretty large following or business, then you can benefit from that. So
100%. Well, I mean, they do say that Instagram is the elite dating app of today, but of course you're only going to be able to access the benefits of that if you've got a decent profile, which generally speaking means a lot of followers, some great pictures, blue check mark. If you can get a blue check mark, that's obviously the golden ticket sort of thing. So
I know this guy from India that can get me one for
really
$5,000. For $5,000. That's what he says. He emailed me 5 times, last week. So
right, okay. Well, it might be.
I just got to give him the $5,000 and he'll give me the blue check mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds legit. Yeah.
I asked the guy, I'm like, how do you get walk me through the process you're going to follow to do this. He's like, I can't tell you, but I can show you all the results we've gotten. And I'm like, yeah, okay. It doesn't work that way, man. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, like, my thing has always been sort of face-to-face interactions, though, and particularly daytime approach, actually. I mean, I used to be really into nighttime stuff, night game, going to clubs all the time and things. Less into that these days. So really, day game is more my fundamental thing, which is obviously approaching during the daytime in coffee shops, in stores, in bookstores, whatever it is. Which I think is a really great skill set for people to have.
So what do you think that kind of the fundamental difference is between like the night game and day game, like as far as the approach? I know it's like, I mean, and I guess I'd ask also, like, are you looking, when you're like coaching on day game, are you looking to pull, or are you just looking at, just a good exchange number, incidate?
What for the guys that I'm coaching, or for
or for yourself, either? Just like,
well, I think it depends on the vibe and the individual girl. I mean, I think in terms of the differences, obviously night game tends to be a lot higher energy. There are all of the the things that get in the way, like the sound of the music, the volume of the music, cock blocks, other her friends, other guys in the venue, the door staff, all of this kind of thing. So you've got all of those sort of elements in night game, and it's very high energy. You need to be up, and you need to be, all of that, which is why, which is why extroverts tend to do pretty well with. I mean, I'm stereotyping a little bit, but extroverts tend to do very well with night game. Whereas daytime approach attracts more introverts because you don't need to be quite as high energy. You don't need to be, you know, that kind of entertainer almost. You can be a little bit more sort of laid back, a little bit more low key, particularly if you're somebody, I mean, you could be somebody who is a very bookish kind of a guy, and you're just meeting girls in bookstores or even libraries. And that's obviously going to be very different to like the pool party in Vegas, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
But having said that, fundamentally, I think the levers of attraction are the same. So it's not like the two things are wildly different. It's more like in the way your persona has to be in order to, to do them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I always think about like the biggest thing, I guess, that I see like the difference is that you got that kind of advantage. Like if you approach in day game, you sort of get points for being courageous, whereas like a night game, it's just kind of expected that girls are going to get hit on at a bar or a nightclub, whereas like a lot of girls are not going to expect some guy to have the balls without any alcohol to walk up to them in the middle of the day or in a coffee shop and talk to them. So you're kind of getting that benefit.
Yeah.
But the challenge that I've always had with the D game is just I guess it depends. Like, if you're trying to do that instant pull, it just seems like a much more difficult obstacle at the day, whereas the night game is set up like with the logistics so that it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, generally speaking, I would say day game is a means of getting contact details. Generally speaking, it's pretty unusual that you're gonna meet a girl in the afternoon in Starbucks and she's going to come back to your place and you're going to seal the deal, as it were. Whereas that is happens obviously quite a lot with night game. I mean, girls do, even in this day and age, girls do go out to, and there is partly this idea that they might meet a guy and sometimes they go home with them. So it's much more like just a normal part of society, isn't it, that it would happen in night game, whereas in day game it would be pretty unusual. Having said that, there is like that sort of as you get later in the day or even into the evening, there is that kind of like grey or sort of like dusk period where things merge a little bit. And I have had some experiences where I've ended up with a girl maybe going for a couple of drinks and then a girl coming back to my apartment or whatever from that period, which is technically a day game scenario. So it can happen, but I think 1 p.m. in the afternoon in your local high street, it's fairly unlikely.
Yeah, that's true. That's it happens, but not very often. Yeah, so I guess it depends on what you're after too, right? It's like yeah. I've always liked night game better because I feel like it's more of an adventure. It's like because you have that option of pulling that night, and it's like, but in general, like I would agree, like day game's probably going to be more effective for most guys. Like they're going to get like a higher ratio of numbers and eventual closes. So
are you going out to the clubs regularly, or what's your?
There's no clubs open here at all. So so there's none of that.
Prior to lockdown though, are you sort of out and about quite a lot, or?
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, mostly coaching, right? Like taking guys out to Vegas or places like that, and showing them the ropes, getting them, and it's kind of interesting, just like how fast someone can advance when you see it happen, right? It's like, I think so much of it is like theoretical, but then when you're live and you see someone actually do it, then you realize like something clicks in your brain. You're like, oh, I could do this. And, it becomes possible. But
the great thing about Vegas as well is there's so many people, there's so many girls, there's so many targets, right? So you could just you could get rejected 100 times and it's still you can just keep going, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you think like what's kind of your basic like philosophy? The debate always comes up with the whole like the looks versus status and money and all of those things. Like what's the kind of thing that like you mostly teach the guys that you're coaching, like in order to have success? Like what do you think is the most important element to success, I would say?
Well, I mean, like I said, I've got this online course, Charisma and Dating Academy, and this isn't a massive plug, but that's something I developed. And what I really teach in that is I do a deep dive into charisma and also into mindsets, charisma, and things like dark triad, by which I mean being, you know, the bad boy archetype, that kind of thing.
Right.
And the reason, and then there's a whole section about game at the end, like the more practical, do this, do that kind of stuff. But the reason that I go into that is because I genuinely think that it's having those mindsets and it's having that sort of personality and the way that you put yourself across, particularly, by the way, putting yourself across in a fairly sexualized sort of manner, is the thing that really makes the difference. I'm not saying that looks don't matter. Obviously they do. You know, money is helpful in terms of giving you access to certain places and for logistics and things like that. But in the end, I think what makes a dude, what arouses her is going to be that sort of chemical connection between the two of you. And it seems to me that comes about largely because of the way that you put yourself across.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I've seen guys, I was talking about this actually recently in a video. I mean, if you go out to a club or a bar, I mean, I have often seen very, very good looking guys who are jacked, sort of standing around at the side, kind of waiting for attention because they think, well, I'm a 9 or I'm an 8.7 or whatever. She should come and approach me. And you get some dude who's not particularly amazing looking, not necessarily that tall, but there's just something about him, and he's kind of relentless, and he goes in and he's got that sort of like thing about him, and that surprisingly turns the dial more than these other qualities.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's so key. I think there was so much of that is lost. Like there was who's this guy? I'm trying to think of his name. There was a guy out there a while back. Shit, I'm trying to think of his name now. He was teaching a lot of like his primary thing that he was teaching was on the whole, like the sexualizing, like everything. I can't think of his name now. I think he was he wasn't with RSD, but he was with the other big group.
Not Love Systems.
Yeah, Love Systems. He was a Love System. Jeremy. No, not Jeremy. Dang, I can't think of his name now, but I mean, most of his content was about like triggering that sexual response, like the hindbrain type of response that we have automatically. I want to say it was Jeremy something, but maybe it was John something. I don't know, but he talked a lot about like this idea of like creating hoops and the idea of like using the language, right? To basically somewhat NLP, but the idea of like one of the things that he said that works so well was he was talking about how like you get to this point and then you'd whisper in this girl's ear and say like if there were no one here, I would bend you over this table right now and fuck the shit out of you. And it's like so few people I think talk about that, but it's such a important aspect, because if you flip that switch, that sexual switch, it makes a huge difference, right? It's like that's why like romance novels and all this stuff are so appealing to women, is because there's just so much of that mental aspect of that attraction.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that I learned very, very early on with the game stuff was that you could push the envelope in terms of being a little bit naughty and a little bit dirty in terms of what you say to girls, even in relatively polite circumstances, right? Do you know what I mean? Because before that, before I sort of learned anything about game, I just thought, like a lot of guys, you've got to be very, very nice. You've got to be very polite. Don't say anything that's too rude, because it's going to offend her and she's going to, whatever. What I discovered through reading other people's reports and then going and trying it myself was that actually you can get away with quite a lot.
Yeah.
You can get away with sexualizing the conversation quite quickly, quite soon after the introduction. You can start dropping in little hints, little naughty jokes and things like that. And far from offending her, actually that's going to get her more turned on, because you've sexualized the conversation. So immediately, rather than it just being like a friend to friend kind of a thing, it's moved into this other dimension, and it's probably got her, you know, thinking a little bit and imagining things and stuff. And that's really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy how far that you can push it. It's one of the exercises I always try to do with my students is I try to get them to go over the line so they can figure out where the line is, because they think the line is like here, but it's really like way over here. And so they're not even close to the line. And it's like, hey, you got to like, you got to get rejected because you said something that was inappropriate. Like that's like your goal for the night. And then it's like, okay, I walked up to this girl and I was like, hey, nice. I like your tits, or, and we started a conversation. And it's like, yeah, that's not enough. Like, it's like, like you think the line is there. You think if you said that, man, you'd get blown out so fast, but it's crazy. But I mean, some of it I think is like how, like you said, like the charisma element of it, like how you perceive, like how you're saying it. Obviously, if you say that in the wrong way, it can go sour. But if you're delivering that with confidence, if there's a smirk on your face, if it looks like you're up to something, then I think you're going to pull that off most of the time.
Well, it's sort of like there's a fine line between just being like, some drunk dude in the bar, like going up and say, yeah, nice tits, but, kind of thing. And doing it a little bit more suggestively, I suppose. And I think I'm talking about being a bit more suggestive. But I think and eye contact is really important here as well. You're looking at her, you're kind of like, you can raise the eyebrows a little bit. You can sort of, you have that kind of naughty eye contact while you're saying these things. That, again, seems to put you in good stead. So what my sort of like model for game, if you like, is going in there and raising the temperature as much as I can. And this is even with day game. I mean, with night game, you should certainly be doing this, but even with day game, you can do this. So you might be having a quite banal conversation about, oh, you've just been shopping, or what have you bought? And then you might say something like, oh, she says something like, oh, I spent too much money. And you say, yeah, I could kind of tell you're a bad girl just by looking at you. And then you give that little eyebrow raise. And of course, there's that double meaning there. You're starting to suggest something. And I find that to be really, really powerful.
Yeah. It's interesting how, like, if you don't go down that road like fairly quickly, that you won't be able to. Like, it's almost like you have that little window of opportunity. It's like you have to have the conversation going that way, otherwise you just like get stuck into this platonic conversation that you can't go anywhere, you can't get out. But it's almost like if you start off very quickly into the interaction with something like that, then you can kind of get into that, it's a much smoother, right?
Because then I think she then marks you down as that kind of guy. She's like, oh, he's that kind of guy. He's this very sexual guy. He's just, he's hitting on me. He's that kind of guy. Whereas if you come in and you're just very friendly and everything else, then she puts you in this other box, which is like, oh, and then if you try to jump from that box to the other box, then it seems to her creepy or incongruent or whatever,
Right, exactly. Yeah. So what do you think, for guys that are like starting, to try and learn game, what's kind of the most effective place that they can start? What can they work on? Like, what's the process that they should follow, in your opinion?
I mean, well, there are a few things that I learned when I first started that really changed everything for me. One of them was this thing about sexualizing the interaction, which we've covered. The other was just the fact that you've ultimately just got to go. You've just got to approach girls. You've got to put yourself out there. This is, to some extent, this is a numbers game, and you need to have volume if you're going to get results. So that was the second thing. Not to take rejection too seriously, then, because it follows on from that. Obviously, you've got to get good at rejection handling. And the other thing that's really important, actually, is touch. That is to say, like a light touch on the arm when you're talking, maybe a touch on the shoulder. Nothing creepy, nothing inappropriate, but just I hasten to add, guys,
especially day game.
Exactly. I mean, we're not talking anything, nothing like sexual, nothing like that, but just if you can start making some little touches, like on the lower arm is good, sometimes on the shoulder, things like that. When you're making a point, that starts to establish this like physical connection between the two of you, and that again is really, really powerful. I think on a subconscious level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes sense. It's just a good habit, like just to get into, just whenever you're talking to someone, like to reach out, touch, on the shoulder, whether it be a guy or a girl. I think is a
Yeah.
good. So you get into the habit of it, so it doesn't feel weird or awkward when you do it in a social situation.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of getting started, there is really no way other than just jumping in sort of thing. I mean, if you want to do day game, if you want to do daytime approach, then I would say you want to be trying to do at least a couple of approaches a day. I mean, what you can do is the classic day game set, if you like, which is you could do 2 hours and you could do 10 approaches within 2 hours.
Right.
So that can work quite well. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to commit that amount of time, at least try to approach a couple of girls that you haven't met before a day, 1 or 2. At the end of the week, you'll have between 7 and 14 new contacts, or you'll have made 7 to 14 new approaches to women that you've never met before, which is probably more than most guys make in a year. So,
True.
but you just need to get out there and start making it happen, basically. And I find like having a target sometimes really helps. If you say to yourself, right, this week I'm going to approach 10 new girls, and then you almost make a note of it so that you're keeping a scorecard kind of thing. That can sort of help to incentivize you a little bit in order to do it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think a lot of guys miss, or they don't understand how many approaches it will take, like to get success and also just to become good, right? It's like, it's a lot of grind in order to get to the point where you're actually effective. But
yes, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, Myron Gaines, who is a good-looking dude who's very well, ripped and all the rest of it. I mean, he says that in Miami, he's doing something up to 40 approaches in order to get a girl to come back with him that particular night. So, you need to put the numbers in for sure. I mean, that maybe he's setting the bar quite high because he's talking about actually getting a girl to come back with him on that same evening, which is, he's not talking about, I got a phone number and everything else. But, I mean, regardless, you do need to put the volume in, and that's just sort of part of the game. But I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, guys, sometimes, guys are like, oh, why should I have to put in all this effort and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, well, where's the hunter instinct? Do you know what I mean? Where's your, this should be kind of exciting. You should be like enthused about the idea of going out and making something happen for yourself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's it's funny, when I first got into game, I was really more about the whole, like, exactly the hunter. Like, I wanted to just do night game, and I just wanted to do pulls because that was the only thing. Like, that was the thrill factor. Was like, that's what I was after. I was like, I didn't even want to, like, I remember when I was first learning, and one of my buddies like, what do you, why don't you just get this girl's phone number? I'm like, I'm not interested in her phone number. Like, I don't give a fuck tomorrow. He's like, you could just call her tomorrow. I'm like, nah. That's not because I was after the hunt. I was after like the conquest of it. As opposed to, so many guys are like, they're thinking of it in the wrong way. So
well, there used to be a thing, actually. I think it was RSD. Maybe Tyler said, go out tonight and don't bring your phone with you, so that so you've got to make something happen because there's no other opportunity for you to, so you just take away that sort of, because it can be an easy out as well. It can be sort of like, oh, I've got a phone number. And then the guy can think, oh, well, he's got that little validation boost. And you then think, oh, I can sort of like take it easy for the rest of the evening or for the rest of the day game session or whatever it is. But of course, as we know, a phone number in itself doesn't mean anything. It's not over until it's over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, it's it means so little to get the phone number. It's like
it does. But at the same time, if you are getting, I don't know, if you're getting like, say, 5, 6, 7 new numbers a week or something, then, you're going to get some conversions in there. And, but it's just, you can't expect the first number that you get to just be a slam dunk conversion, because it just doesn't happen like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me see. Jaw Paw said, I think you guys are concentrating too much on small details is it really that important? What do you think about that?
I don't know really, because I think we were talking more about the meta stuff, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it matters that much. Things like a friend of mine teaches day game. Actually, he's quite a renowned day game instructor, and he told me he had a German guy on one of his boot camp events, and the German guy was like, so is it best to approach from the left or the right? And things like that aren't important. Do you know what I mean? Actually, the opener that you use isn't important, really.
Right.
You've just got to open the conversation, So actually, little things by and large aren't that important. The important thing is that you're taking the action. It's better to almost it's better to go in and just, make a mess of it initially. At least you've taken action. You never know what's going to happen, So I think thinking too much about the little details can actually hold you back from taking the actions that you need to take.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think like 90% of guys, like they're, at least the guys that I coach, their biggest problem is that they're not approaching and they're afraid to approach. And so it's like, that's what I work on mostly, because, we can't get to step 2 until you get past step 1. And if 90% of guys are stuck on step 1, that's the most important thing. Just go up and say, hey, like literally just go up and say, hey. And that's like, you're already like, your success rate just increased by 1,000% because, before you were the guy standing around waiting for the girl to talk to you, and that, had a very, very low success rate. But yeah, I mean, that to me, that's like high level stuff. I mean, you can get into the weeds and get into the details, but you got to be at least like, you got to be getting somewhere first. And that's, I think, that's what most guys should focus on, right? It's just open. Yeah.
I think opening and then leading the conversation forward in a where you're either gonna take it somewhere. So either you're gonna effectively like bring her home with you that night, or you're going to at least get some contact details so you can follow up with her afterwards. Because actually another problem that I think some guys sometimes have before they get into game is that they will open conversations with girls and then they either don't quite know how to, or they chicken out of pushing it to that next stage. So then the interaction goes on for a bit, then it kind of fizzles out, and then he doesn't know or doesn't take that risk of saying, well, actually, why don't we go back to my place because there's this great movie I've got to show you, or why don't we exchange numbers and then we can meet up again in the week, or whatever it is. He doesn't go for the close. And as John's Modern Life Dating says, you've got to always be sourcing and always be closing.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's definitely a sticking point for guys that they get to the point where they can open. How do they, like, what's the best way you think to make that interaction go smoothly, so it's not just like the interview where it's like, oh, where do you work, and what did you do today, how was your day, that kind of bullshit type of stuff that doesn't get you anywhere. So like, what's the best kind of way that you found like to make that conversation better?
Well, with day game, there's a structure called the London day game model, which was developed by Tom Torero and Nick Krauser and some other people who were around at that time. And it's obviously they were in London, but this is something that's been used all over the world by different guys. And I think it's a good structure, I think, to use day game, night game, whatever. And basically, what it is: open, stack, vibe, then hook point. Then you do a little bit of comfort, and then you close or get the number. And so those bits at the beginning. So you open. So you're like, hey, I just saw you. You look kind of cute. I wanted to come meet you. My name's Troy. Blah, whatever. And then the next bit is stack. And what they mean by that is you start throwing out some assumptions about her. So you don't necessarily. I mean, you can ask questions. People get too hung up with these things, but basically you start to throw out some assumptions about her. So you could be like, oh, you that dark hair, you look kind of Italian, or you look Spanish, or you've got kind of Colombian vibe about you, the way you walk. And you throw some stuff out there, and hopefully she says, oh yeah, no, I'm actually from Bogota, or whatever it is. And then you go into vibing, and with vibing, what you do is a bit of storytelling, or effectively you've got to start talking and kind of keep the vibe going for a short period of time. So you might say something like, oh well, I went to Bogota once, and it was just this amazing, beautiful city, and like during the daytime it was so cultured, and we went to the museums, we were looking at the parks, and we had this amazing time. And then my friend said we should go out at night. So we went out to the area where all the bars are, that area called XYZ. And, we were out there and we went into this bar, and it was crazy because it was really dark. There were these red lights, and we walked into the bar, and it was all girls. And there were just all these girls just looking at us with these like eyes, like laser beams. I said, I tell you what, the girls in Bogota, they are just so predatory. We were scared for our lives, Are you that kind of girl? So you sort of, right, yeah. You sort of pull out, you sort of tell some story, basically just keep talking. And what you're looking for is for her to hook into the conversation. So at some point, hopefully during that, and you can spin it out for longer than that or whatever, but hopefully at some point she goes, oh yeah. And then even better, she asks you something. So then she says, oh, so how long did you stay there? And as soon as she's done that, you've got, that she's kind of like hooked, or she's kind of okay with the interaction. And at that point, then you can start to go into a bit more of a normal conversation. But I think sort of talking at the beginning and keeping it going, is really is important.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I mean, so many guys, like they're waiting for her to say something, or they drop out early. That's another one I see, I think, all the time, is like guys don't think it's going well, so they just like, okay, well, I better get going, instead of like being persistent and like just sticking. Like if she doesn't walk away, then you're still in set, you're still there, like just keep on going.
We remember the thing about they called it plowing, didn't they? They used to call it plowing, where you just keep going. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, it's always a balance, isn't it? Because sometimes she's just not interested, and you may as well cut your losses and go. But equally, there are other times it just takes a while, And the other thing as well is that you approached her. This is the other thing. Like guys, sometimes guys in day game will go up and say, "Hey, I saw you. Look really cute." And then it's like they're waiting for, come on, then reward me because I've come up. And she goes, "Oh, right, thanks." And then she walks off, And you've got to do a bit of the legwork because you were the one who opened the interaction. You're the one who's sort of like, so it's not being a dancing monkey. It's not like sublimating yourself in front of her, but it's like you've got to put in a bit of the legwork at the beginning to get things going.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's always like, I think you can always like, if things are fizzling out and you're like, okay, well, I should just cut my losses. Well, you might as well just get blown out at that point. Then like start pushing the envelope and see, right? Yeah. Because you got nothing to lose. Like at least you get blown out there, and then that it's off the table instead of wasting your time. Because some guys will waste their time like for an hour, 2 hours talking to this one girl. And it's like, it's clearly not going anywhere. And it's like, okay, well, 30 minutes in, you should have figured out, okay, I'm going to give her a test and see, like, all right, is she into me or not? Is she compliant or not? And see what she does, like do something extreme, say something, rude, or, see how she reacts, like, spike the emotion, do something at least. And then if she gets pissed off and you're done, then, hey, then at least you don't waste another hour, talking to her. So,
well, that's why I quite like going in, being quite flirtatious and quite suggestive and all the rest of it, because, you're putting her in a position where she kind of has to reject you or go along with it, because you don't want to. This is why I generally go direct as well. I don't really like being indirect and sort of starting a conversation about something else with her. I prefer to go in and just say, you're looking kind of cute, or, and sort of just set the frame from the beginning, because I'd rather, she knows what's up, what's up. If she's not interested, then she's going to tell you, and that's it, Whereas the worst thing to do is to get into this prolonged conversation in this kind of friend zoney way, and then 3 hours later, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Afi there. He with the super chat. Appreciate you, man.
Good stuff, man.
But yeah, I totally agree about that. That's yeah, you kind of gotta have to push it forward, and also, like, I guess maybe that's the other thing is, right? So I see this all the time too with guys that I'm coaching, is that they get to the point where they actually have come into the conversation. It's flirtatious, and I'm watching the interaction, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, pull, like, do something, like like it's right, like, it's like, stop, like, you don't need to keep on going at this point, like go and make the move, like make the invite, like close, uh what, how do you see that, like, as far as like learning when it's time to close or not?
Well, like I say, once she has shown some interest in keeping the thing going, like if she asks you, well, like you said, I mean, the very first thing is, has she walked away or not? If she hasn't walked away, that's a good sign. But beyond that, if she asks you a question, if she's like laughing at your jokes, if she's like whacking you on the arm when you tell a joke, things like this, then you can get you get the sense that she is somewhat invested in this, and as soon as that happens, you can then start to pull it back a little bit. Again, I think it was Tyler used to talk about this. Guys can get very addicted to attraction, because you're going in there and you're saying some crazy stuff, and she's going, "Oh my god," and you're having this sort of emotional effect on her, and that can feel good because it's like, oh, I'm getting somewhere here. But actually, after a period of time, you can pull that back. Right. You don't have to stay in that attraction building sort of mode. It's actually counterproductive to do so, because firstly, she potentially is just going to think that you are sort of a one-trick pony kind of, 2D player type guy. And secondly, you need to then move things on. So, when she's invested, you can start to pull it back a little bit. You can start to bring a little bit more comfort in as well. You can show that you're actually you're a decent guy and everything else. But then at some point, you've got to say, listen, let's go on to the next thing. Let's go for a drink somewhere else. I want to show you some stuff at my place. I want to, whatever it is. And it's incumbent upon you to do that, because she's not going to do that, or very, very rarely is she going to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 It's like so many guys are like stuck and they're waiting for, like, okay, like as if the next step is just going to naturally progress, as opposed to you making it happen because you're deciding that you're going to make it happen, because it's just naturally.
I mean, one thing about that is, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but particularly maybe less on the first meeting, but certainly on the date, you can pull the trigger, so to speak, much more quickly than you think. You can make things happen much more quickly than perhaps you think you can. Like guys will go on a date and think, oh, I've got to be here all night, I've got to be here for hours before I could possibly make any kind of a move. And actually, that's not true. You can make that move after one drink. You can make that move after a couple of drinks. So, I think it's obviously it's partly experience, and it's partly just having a sense of the vibe with that particular person in that particular situation. But I think in the end, if you make your move with confidence, you'll probably in most cases be able to make it a lot earlier than you think you would.
Yeah. I agree. The way that I always advise, like, for handling it, is that it's better to make the move early on, because you don't want to get stuck in that place where it's now difficult for you to make any kind of move, right? If you've been talking, platonic on a date, and you haven't had any kind of physical touch at all for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, then it's gonna be really difficult and awkward. But if at the very beginning or pretty soon into the interaction, you're doing something, you're at least making it physical, you're at least giving a hug, or like, have your arm on her around her, or on her shoulder, or something like that, then you're creating that automatically, like that assumption. And then even if you get rejected, then you can still retry again, like if she's still there on the date. And it's like that boldness, sometimes like that boldness is what you need. Like, how many like you can literally go in for a kiss and get rejected right there, and then the next time you're not going to get rejected, because she realizes how bold you are,
Yeah.
and that's attractive. So
Yeah, exactly. As long as you do it in a kind of cheeky,
yeah,
sort of like kind of playful way. But yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got to, you've got to be prepared to be a little bit persistent. She's not gonna.
yeah,
Well, in many cases, she's not going to just sort of say, right, yeah, okay, let's go, sort of thing. And that's just part of the game. You are the guy is. It's incumbent on the guy to make the moves, to push things forward. That's just the way it is in most cases. So just be prepared to do that.
yeah. All right. Trying to think what else I was gonna ask you about. I mean, what about the whole like just the kind of, I know you've talked about stoicism some, and the like the emotional mastery that guys have. I feel like so many guys today like have no control over their emotions, and that's a lot of the
Yeah.
problem that they have with women. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, I think emotional control is maybe the most important thing in all of the game, and quite possibly actually in other aspects of life as well, including like business and work and everything else. I think the more that you're able to control your emotions or have some sort of handle on your emotions, the better. But like as we were saying last week on Rule Zero, emotions, people think, oh, like love, anger, jealousy, these big emotions. But actually, it's quite small things as well. It's like, fear of embarrassment or something, sort of like laziness is kind of an emotion, so you might be in the coffee shop and you see a really attractive girl opposite you, and you want to approach her, but then you feel embarrassed. And so you
Right.
give in to that emotion and you don't approach her. And actually, if you'd been sort of in control of that emotion, if you'd have said to yourself, well, okay, I recognize that I'm feeling this emotion. However, in order to further my goals, which is to have a good dating life, it would be better if I went and talked to this girl. Then you'd have taken that action, and that would be, you'd be in a better position. So it's sort of like we can allow our emotions to mess us up. If you've got on one side the intellect and you've got, right, this is what I want to achieve, these are the steps I would need to take to do it, and then on the other side you've got the emotions, which are sort of just messing it all up all the time. The more of a handle you've got on the emotions, the better off you're going to be, I think. But of course, it's difficult to do. It's easier said than done, for sure, I think.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think it's definitely one of the more difficult things to do in life, to develop that level of emotional mastery where the shit doesn't phase
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
you almost got to be like autistic when it comes to like, you got to be like, I don't
Yeah.
care, I'm just gonna say what I want to say. And but there's some good freedom in that. I think when you get to the point where you just literally don't give a fuck, then you can kind of do what you want, and you sort of
Yeah.
act out of instinct and impulse, instead of acting from very I think we get trapped in this very calculated, and that screws up guys, right? Especially smart guys, like analytical guys that try to do game, is they're like thinking about all the moves and everything, and they're processing what they're going to say, as opposed to just being, a lot of times the dumb kind of guy that just blurts out whatever is on his mind. He's more successful because that's more of the vibe. Like it's the carefree
Yeah.
type of nature, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I mean, what about like a guy who stays in a relationship for too long because he doesn't want to face, like the upset of leaving it, or it's all of these decisions that people make, and like we're all guilty of it. But these decisions that people make, which are based on emotion rather than on cold hard logic. And if you could be that kind of just cold hard logical guy who just sticks with that thing, then theoretically I think you'd be very, very, I mean, I say successful. I think you could go through life on a very linear path, But of course, the truth of the matter is, people find that's probably impossible to do it 100%, and people sort of deviate from side to side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I always think of it as like that game, The Sims.
yeah,
It's like you're playing your sim. Like if you imagine yourself as playing your sim, then like you make the sim do all this stuff that is good for the sim, right? But
mm.
if you're the actual sim, you don't want to do that shit. Like,
Yeah.
but being the
Yeah.
controller, so it's like you almost gotta step outside yourself and be yourself as a sim and be like, all right, you need to just go and do this. Like, I'm gonna command you to go and talk to this girl. I'm gonna command you to like
Yeah.
go to the gym and run and like, and do all these things. And then that kind of takes the emotion element out of it, because there's a logical element of like, what should I do logically, and then there's the emotional element of like, do I want to actually do the best thing or not?
Yeah. 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 Of course. Of course. Would you say that counts in business as well? Just in terms of, I suppose a very basic idea is like, a dude wants to build some sort of a business on the side, but he's afraid it's not going to work, so he doesn't put in the action. Things like that. It's
Yeah, I think game and business are almost the same thing. I mean, you're really trying to accomplish the same thing. You're trying to, like, you need a lot of traffic. You're trying to convert that traffic, and you're trying to get something from that, and provide some value along the way as well, right? So that it's
yeah,
a good exchange, convince people of the value. So yeah, but it's
yeah,
the same thing I think with the emotional mastery in businesses, because you got to make the decision based on what's the most rational thing to do, as opposed to what you feel, because you're not going to feel like getting up and doing the work, or you're not going to feel like taking the risk that you might need to take in business, but you have to like do the calculation and then decide that this is the right course of action, and then take that action, because everyone knows, like, it's the same thing like with everything, right, in life, is like losing weight. Like, do you really not know how to lose weight or get in shape? Like, everyone knows how to. I mean, sure, there's specific diets and stuff, but there's no fucking secret. I mean, you go to the gym and you lift weights and you don't eat too much. You eat
yeah,
less calories than you burn. And so it's like, but what stops us from being successful? It's because even though we know what to do, we can't make ourselves do it, right? From a logical perspective, we know, but we don't feel like it. We don't want
yeah,
to do the thing. So yeah, so I think it applies across the board.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Robert Greene talks about it actually in that new book, The Art of Human Nature,
Oh
and
yeah.
he says somewhere near the beginning about how people who are able to base their lives more on sort of calculation rather than emotion tend to be more successful. And I think that's really, really true. I've been talking about it, I've been tweeting about this and stuff recently, and it's something that's been on my mind. I'm not saying I've got it down by any means, but I'm just saying I think it's an interesting thing, because certainly guys I know who've been very successful seducers, the most successful of these guys tend to be guys who are pretty sort of emotionless, really, or pretty sort of kind of, they've got that kind of ice cold thing about them.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think because a lot of it too is just like with interactions with women. I mean, just in general, a lot of the times when we show emotions, it's out of a nervousness, out of like trying to make the other person feel comfortable, so we'll feel comfortable, right?
Yeah,
So if someone smiles at you, you smile back. Why? Is it because you're happy? It's usually because you don't want to create an awkward situation, right? It's like you're sort of giving into that other person's frame, and so I think that's why like
yeah,
guys that tend to be more ice cold tend to do well with women, because women know that that guy's not reacting to them, like he's unreactive. He just
yeah,
he doesn't feel like he needs to do anything to win their approval, or he's of enough value that he doesn't really care what they think, because a lot of
yeah,
that emotional reaction is like to get something else from the other person, or to make them feel better, or to comfort ourselves, so we're not as nervous. So
yeah, exactly. So the more that you can kind of recognize that and sort of rein those things in yourself, and I'm speaking for myself here as much as anybody else, is that's going to put you in a better stead, I think. Particularly with, like, if you're somebody who is doing game and you're not really bothered about getting into a long-term relationship, and you're maybe dealing with all these different girls, and you're dating concurrently different girls and things, there's a lot to deal with there. I mean, you're going to get a lot of like flack thrown at you from these different girls, and they're different. There's a lot to deal with, and you've got to. The most effective way of doing that is to be relatively measured and have some sort of control over yourself going through that. And people that don't, I think they're they're going to find it tougher.
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things, especially like you're saying, like guys in relationships, for them to learn is to, it should just be able to walk away. Like it's to not, it's like, and I've kind of just trained myself. Like I don't get into arguments or fights with people.
Yeah,
I like if they say something or they get in my face or they like try and like, provoke me, I just I just disconnect. I just go and do my thing, or I just leave, or
yeah,
I just will not let someone get a rise out of me. And I think that's like, so many guys fall into that trap. They get in fights with their girlfriend. It's like you should never be fighting with your girlfriend. You should just be like, if she's not complying to what you want, then you're just creating distance. Like because
yeah,
why would you, you don't need to engage in something. Like when you engage at that level, like you lower yourself down and you lose control of the frame, like you're coming into her frame. But it's a hard, I think it's a hard lesson, right? Because you get emotionally invested and you feel like you have to defend a position, or someone attacks you, you feel like you have to defend yourself, but it's really coming from weakness.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, this is really tough. It's not always easy. It kind of depends on what level you're coming in or at on this stuff. I mean, there's the old thing about people who have psychopathic tendencies, and I talk about this a bit in the course, and also some other stuff that I've done, other writing that I've done, because there is this idea that people who have that dark triad personality, that psychopathy, that Machiavellianism, that narcissism, those people tend to be very successful. And although maybe a bit screwed up as well, whether those people are massively happy is another question, but they do tend to be quite successful in business and corporate work and politics and in dating and sex and romance and stuff as well. So is there a way that if you're not naturally that kind of guy, which maybe many of us aren't, can you nevertheless recognize that and take some of those traits a little bit and sort of sprinkle them onto your personality, and I think you can. I think there's stuff to be learned. So that's kind of what I like to talk about with guys a lot.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, it's kind of funny. I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I think that I don't trust anyone who's not a narcissist, because they're just lying. Because fundamentally, like at the center of all of our universes is us. Like like every human being, like the most in-baked drive that we have within us, even more than the sex urge, is for our own survival, right? That's like, if you've ever read like 1984 and the kind of the end of that, like that is like, I mean, the dude betrays everything in his life for his survival, and that's kind of how we are. Like and so like I trust someone who's a narcissist because they're just being real, right?
Yeah. Well, I think these are not necessarily bad qualities to have. I mean, it depends on your view of morality and ethics and all the rest of it. But like with things like Machiavellianism but I mean, like fundamentally, I think all of those dark triad things, another way of putting it is being your own mental point of origin. Because if you were, I mean, psychopathy, people think about Hannibal Lecter and serial killers and things like that. And of course, that's one extreme of it. But I think one way of looking at psychopathy is lack of empathy. And in the end, that's like being really focused on yourself. Because if you were solely focused on yourself, you wouldn't be that bothered about people around you, And Machiavellianism is just kind of being a bit sneaky and being prepared to bend the rules. And I don't think any of those things are actually that bad. Right. Obviously taken to an extreme, maybe they're bad. They can be antisocial. But like, if you want to, we're all only on the planet for a short period of time. There are certain things that you want to get. You want to have a certain quality of life. Well, how are you going to achieve those things? And these traits can help in that regard, and certainly in terms of sex and dating as well.
Yeah. I think what a lot of it comes down to is just the ability to like emotionally remove yourself from the situation, right? Because again, like the whole psychopathy and sociopathy, like people, it's seen as a bad label, but really, in my mind, that's a person that's able to disconnect themselves emotionally from the situation, view it from an analytical, rational viewpoint of what is the best course of action that will achieve their goal. They don't have emotions or empathy. It's just that they're able to like separate those two things out in life and to say, okay, here's what makes logical sense for achieving this goal. and then here's how I feel about it, but I don't mix those two things together. And
Yeah.
I think, again, I think that's why guys that are able to do that are so successful with women, is because they don't get caught up in the bullshit. They don't get caught up in how hot the girl is. They're like, okay, this is what I want. This is how I act. And I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a smaller way, it's sort of like people pleasing as well, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, one of the guys that I've met who is possibly one of the most successful guys I've ever met with women, nothing to do with this space, nothing to do with, YouTube channels or books or anything like that. Just a regular guy. He displayed a lot of these characteristics, these dark triad characteristics, and he was also, and this is another thing actually about dating skills, qualification. So when you are talking to the woman, are you qualifying yourself to her? That is to say, are you trying to sort of like, oh, what can I do to make you like me? Or are you looking at her and saying, well, okay, what's so good about you, kind of thing? And I saw him interacting with women during the time we were working together. I saw him interacting with women during that time. And he was very much like, he would look at them in that sort of quizzically and sort of be like, okay, so what have you got to offer? And that is very much from the frame of, not being a people pleaser, being the opposite. It's more like, well, I'm really awesome, so how are you going to please me? And needless to say, that got these girls very excited, and he ended up sort of like having a lot of affairs where we worked and with different people and things. And it was crazy, but it was all down to the fact that he just didn't give a damn about what other people thought, not even beautiful women.
No, that's the key. it's so difficult I mean, it's easy to say, but so difficult to do, to get to the point where you
yeah, I think some people are naturally like it. I think that guy was like a natural, as we would say, and fair enough. I don't think everybody is. I don't think I am. Do you know what I mean? But I think that you can observe these people and you can see what's working for them, and then you can take bits of that for yourself.
Yeah, what I found, like what I did to help develop this trade, because again, I didn't have this naturally at all, was that I just put myself in uncomfortable situations as much as possible.
Yeah.
And even like just creating awkward silences. I remember when I was like first learning, I would just like go up and talk to a girl and just like stop talking, and then I would just stare, and then like make her break the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like your heart is pounding, like it feels so uncomfortable to you, but you do that enough times, and then you become the person who pushes other people off of balance and off a kilter, instead of being, pushed off all the time. And then, you stop, then you really get to the point where you don't care what people think anymore, because you're used to it. Like, it's almost like, training in the heat, and being used to the hot weather, and then someone who's from a more moderate area comes and trains with you, and they're going to be dying of the heat because they're not used to it. But it's like, you're used to the heat, like you're used to like being in uncomfortable situations, so you don't give a fuck.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you do get that to some extent through just doing lots and lots of approaches, having lots and lots of social interactions, because then because really, I mean, in an interaction where you are walking up to somebody that you find attractive and having a conversation with them, I mean, there's only so many things that can happen. Right. I mean, you might get an outlier where she kind of, I don't know, throws a plate at you or something, but in the main, there's only so many things that can happen, so many things that she can say, so many ways that she can react. And when you've done thousands of them, then you start to see the patterns, and it phases you less. Right. And you just kind of care less. And so that, like, just aversion therapy is one way of getting better at this, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's very true. I think a lot of guys that, they think that the difficulty is always going to be there, like the discomfort, but at some point the discomfort doesn't matter. So I mean, I think you still always have the fear to some degree. I don't think that ever goes away, but you develop a sense of courage and knowing that you've done this before, that makes it easier for you to do that, and to like operate in less of a flight or fight mode when you're in the interaction.
Yeah, definitely. It's just sort of internalizing it, it's sort of like, it's because I think, like I say, I think particularly with that thing about qualification, that thing about like, okay, so what are you bringing to the party? That is, you can get to that even as a reformed nice guy, but then it can kind of go away again. And then if you leave it like a week and a half later, you're talking to somebody else and you're like, oh my God, please like me. So whereas I think some guys just have that ingrained, because I think some guys just have that natural arrogance. And I think that it's sort of, for others, it takes a bit of practice to kind of get there, but that is a very effective way of being with women, because of course most guys are kissing their ass basically. So if you can be different to that, that's going to make you stand out.
Yeah, and it's kind of a self-reinforcing thing, right? Because it's like, I think a lot of the guys maybe that are natural, that the way that they got to being natural is that they essentially like had exhibited this behavior at some point unconsciously. They were rewarded for it, and so that reinforced that behavior, and then they got to the point where they have a very high value of themselves because people always respond favorably to them, and so that reinforces the acting that way, like I'm bigger, I'm better than you, and I don't really give a fuck, and that always gets a positive, it gets that positive reaction. Whereas I think it can go the other way too, right? It's like you exhibit like that very, very docile behavior, and you get bullied for that, or you basically get a negative reaction, and then so you keep on exhibiting that behavior, or it reinforces that belief about yourself that you're less, that people are going to react to you negatively, people are going to reject you, which makes you act more submissive every time that you get into an interaction.
Yeah. I really like that thing that Chateau Hartis, the blogger, used to talk about, that irrational self-confidence, which is basically this idea that you walk into the room and you're irrationally self-confident about yourself, so even if there's sort of nothing to back it up, you've just got this real internal like cockiness and kind of arrogance about you. And my belief is that, because I'm on board with the Rich Cooper stuff, I think, do the work, you should be self-improving, you should be, money muscles game, all that kind of stuff, 100%. But at the same time, if you can also develop that slightly highly inflated opinion of yourself, that kind of narcissism, that's going to put you in really good stead, and you can get to it because you can have that confidence in your future self, because you can be like, well, okay, well, I'm not totally where I want to be now, but I know that I will be. So I'm still awesome. It's just I'm a couple of years, we've got a couple of years to go before we see the fruits of that. But do you know what I mean? I think you need to be doing the self-improvement stuff. But also, if you could just walk around like you are proverbially God's gift, then, because of the way that humans are, that people are going to buy into that and they're going to be attracted to that,
Yeah. I think so. It's a hard persona sometimes to play, but I think one key to it is like letting go of the stakes, right? Like if you're coming to an interaction, like trying to gain something from it, or you feel like you've got something on the line, but then it's going to be harder to act that way. But if you're coming to an interaction thinking, I'm here for the fun, I'm here to watch the movie, I don't care how things go, this is going to be an epic night no matter what happens, like or an epic day, and it's like, I'm just here to like, it'll be a fun experience when I talk about this later, or whatever it is, like then you have less attached to it. It's just like, when I used to play poker, right, we'd have this term scared money, right? And it's like guys that come in with their last $100 and sit down at the table. Well, when those guys are playing, they're not playing optimally. They're playing conservative or scared. They're making all these mistakes because they have so much on the line. Whereas if you don't care, if it's like you've got $10,000 in your pocket and you put $100 down on the table, you can play a much more optimal game because you don't have scared money. You're like, the stakes are not so high for you because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Any way you can take the pressure off yourself is good. And I mean, one way to do it, particularly with like nights out, is just to, like you say, just to think, this is going to be an awesome night. I mean, you can even go for broke. Guys can even go for broke and say, I'm just going to get rejected as many times as I can tonight.
Yeah.
Just for a laugh, just for the story. And if you go out and you try to get rejected 10 times, a lot of the time what you'll find is that you can't really get to 10. You get to a few, and but then you start to have these annoyingly good interactions. You're like, oh God, we're going to get somewhere here. So any way that you can take the pressure off yourself is really key, I think.
Yeah, I call that like context shifting, where you change the goal, right? So a lot of the guys,
Yeah.
when I'm coaching guys, they're like what they consider a win is to get the phone number or to close or whatever it is, and I have them shift it so that your win is just putting yourself in a difficult situation, right? Just getting yourself uncomfortable, and like you can't always win when your qualification for winning is that you get the phone number, you close, but you can always win when your condition for winning is getting in an uncomfortable situation. You can always put yourself in that situation. So you have
Yeah.
100% control over your win, and you can choose to win anytime you want. And then it changes your behavior completely, because when your objective is just all I have to do to win is get myself in an uncomfortable situation and stay there, then it's a whole different perspective at what you're
Yeah.
looking at trying to, just like you said, like trying to get rejected. Okay, now I'm having fun, I'm playing a game, as opposed to high stakes, I need to like get the phone number, I need to like make this shit happen. Instead it's like, okay, I'm having a good time, I'm going to see what I can say and try to get
Yeah.
rejected,
Yeah.
so
Well, yeah, or like you say, trying to make it as awkward as possible can be quite funny. Because if you're going to go down anyway, you might as well go down in flames. And I think it was Julian RSD used to do that. He'd go into the set and try to make it just as awkward as he possibly could make it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will pay off. Sometimes she would just find it so funny that they go into a normal interaction. So taking the pressure off is key.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, make sure you go check out Troy's channel. I put the link in the description down below, and he's got a lot of really good content on his channel, especially for day game and really improving your skills as a man. I really enjoyed a lot of his stuff here, and yeah. Anything else you want to say, Troy?
No, not at all. I mean, thanks ever so much for having me on. It's been really cool, really good discussion. And my Charisma and Dating Academy course reopens again on August the 7th. Okay. So there's going to be a 5-day enrollment period. So if you guys come to my YouTube channel, there'll be loads of notifications there and stuff like that about how you can get involved. But yeah, August the 7th is the enrollment date for that.
August the 7th. All right. Yeah, definitely, guys, check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. You got to be ready for when everything opens up again here.
Exactly. So, Summer of love.
Exactly. All right. Take care, Troy. Take care, guys.
Cheers, man. Bye-bye.